Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, September 23rd. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over a recap of a lot of the big game from the NFL slate this Sunday. We're going to turn our attention to college football, talk about a couple of games that got my attention from that slate this weekend, talk about all of that and more in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, September 23rd. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are getting to college football. College football had a crazy, crazy week. My alma mater, JMU, I'm going to start off there, put up a little bit of bias here. They dropped 70 points, taking on an taking on a Power 5 opponent, Power 4 opponent now in the ACC's UNC, makes Mac Brown think about retirement before changing his mind there. They win 70-50. Quarterback Alonzo Barnett puts up a school record 7 total touchdowns. JMU puts up 611 total yards, dominates in all 3 phases of the game, forcing multitudes of turnovers, blocking a punt, returning it for a touchdown. It was just an incredible game for JMU, stamping themselves as true group of 5 contenders for that playoff spot. A really actually competitive spot as we talk about the playoffs, as we get a little bit closer to it. Not to put, predictions out there or anything, and we'll get to group of 5, top 5 tomorrow. A lot of those contenders lost. A lot of those teams that we thought would be that group of 5 contender, or even some of the Power 4 contenders, haven't been as good as we thought they are. There's a real shot we get 2 group of 5 schools in the playoffs this year. It's just the top 5 conference winners. The ACC's been struggling. If Miami starts to fall off a little bit, or if, the Big 12 keeps on cannibalizing itself, there's a chance we see 2 group of 5 members in there. Not a good chance, but a chance. JMU stamping itself currently as the second highest odds out of the group of 5 to make a playoff spot, only trailing Boise State. But outside of that game, we had action on Friday night. A couple of crazy games on Friday night, starting off with a ranked matchup as Illinois traveled to Nebraska. I think 2 more Huskers have in Nebraska. They win in overtime. Illinois 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 197 yards. Luke Altmaier was for 4 touchdowns, 215 yards, including the game winner in overtime. It was just an incredible game. Back and forth. Obviously, Illinois' defense has been the story of the year, but Altmaier coming in, he wasn't this same guy last year. Getting a change of coaching staff has been a huge part of making this Illinois team true in that Big Ten title. Obviously, you have your big dogs at the top and your Ohio States, your Oregons, and your Michigans who are ranked all the way up there. But there's a couple guys in the middle that are trying to get back up there, including Illinois, Rutgers. Rutgers, a team that we'll talk about in just a second. But Illinois stamping a huge win on their season, improving to 4-0, really putting themselves back in that national spotlight. They already took down a ranked Kansas team earlier this season. They're 2-0 against ranked opponents. There's a chance they could make some noise this season. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, but there is a chance they could pull off a couple more upsets, and they're up there in the conversation for the Big Ten. Illinois, with that defense and with Altmaier playing the way he is a very dangerous team. I talked about Rutgers, Indiana as well, putting up 52 against Charlotte. All those JMU transfers, Kurt Cignetti turning that program around in one season. Of course he did. All he does is win wherever he goes. There's a couple, the Big Ten's a very strong conference. There's a couple of those guys in the middle that have a chance of changing some things and the way we look at that conference right now. Speaking of Rutgers, they pull out a huge victory in a Big Ten ACC battle, traveling down to Blacksburg, Virginia, taking out Virginia Tech 26-23, a game that they almost blew there at the end. They were up big heading into the fourth quarter in the second half. They were up 23-7 in that fourth quarter. They almost bring it all back. In fact, Virginia Tech even ties the game before Rutgers gets that game-winning field goal with about 2 minutes to go in the game. There were a couple of takeaways for me in this game. First of all, that Virginia Tech offensive line, the Virginia Tech team as a whole was really overrated. Kyron Drones doesn't have a lot of time back there in the pocket to make things happen. He needs a little bit of help from that offensive line. The Rutgers quarterback situation is better than I thought. It's not great. And against a Virginia Tech defense that isn't the greatest, it's not the biggest test. But Kyle Monangai, with his workload, he is Rutgers. They go as he goes. 26 carries in this game, 84 yards and a touchdown. Not the greatest yards per carry, but I mean, when you give a guy 26 carries, he does basically everything you would expect out of him and more. A very impressive win for a Scarlet Knights team that, is another one of those teams in the Big Ten that we should keep an eye on. Maybe they have a chance over there. We talk about a fun game. Kansas falls to West Virginia 32-28. They were up big in that fourth quarter there, blowing on the road. Kansas just can't hold a lead. They turn the ball too much. They did a much better job of it in this game, but West Virginia is a very good team. That's the third loss for Kansas, all but eliminating them from the postseason, which is a shame because they had such high hopes heading into the season. Losses against Illinois, losses against West Virginia, losses against UNLV, all of these great programs, all of these really, really good teams. It's just not enough for this Kansas team. They'll be back. They'll be better next year, but it's a tough look for the Kansas team this season that was started off the season ranked, played all the way up to number 19 country, have now lost 3 straight games. A shocker to me, maybe a shocker of the day, of the whole season so far, maybe. USC, traveling to the Big House, loses to a Michigan team that makes a switch at quarterback to Alex Orji, only throws the ball 9 times, which I guess you can expect when Alex Orji is your starting quarterback. But still, you take a look at this USC team, they put up a tough battle against LSU, against a lot of their opponents this year. They were ranked in that top 12. Michigan pulls up a big win. If they can continue to play like this, if they can continue to run the ball as good as they did in this game, they're going to be a very, very tough out. This is the kind of team that if they get hot and they can continue to run the ball down your throat, that is going to be an issue because they're big, they're strong up front, and they can tire you out, and that's when they start to pull away. That's what we saw in this game. Michigan gets a huge, huge win, one that is probably season-saving for them. If they lose this one, they're basically out of the playoff race. But they're square back in it again, a huge boost for them this week after a big win in the Big House. Maybe the game of the week as Utah traveled to Oklahoma State, winning 22-19 without Cam Rising. That's the big one. Cam Rising was expected to play. He did not end up suiting up. This is a very different team with and without Cam Rising. They were still able to pull off a big win against Oklahoma State, a team that's kind of struggled a little bit. Ollie Gordon has not been able to get the same kind of offense that we've been expecting out of him this season, a guy that was getting some Heisman talk at the beginning of the year. Alan Bowman has not been able to step up the way that Oklahoma State needs him to when they need him to do it. He's been inconsistent. There's games where he throws for 400 yards, and there's games where he's way too sloppy with the ball. Against a quality opponent like Utah, against the other quality opponents in the Big 12, that is not going to be enough. Oklahoma State needs to pull off a couple wins. That is a huge, huge leg up for Utah, who without Cam Rising gets a great, great first win in the Big 12. Another one of those ranked matchups that I wanted to focus on here. Tennessee traveled down to Oklahoma to take on the Sooners, a welcome to the SEC game. They pull out a tough victory, 25-15. It's not the same Tennessee team that we've been seeing dominate offensively, put up 30, 40 points a game earlier on in the season. This is a good Oklahoma team, but as far as their offense goes, I need to see more. This Tennessee defense, while it's good, isn't world-beating. This Tennessee offense is really what's been carrying them. Now, as far as their defense has been playing great, but we take all of that together. We take all of what they've been doing, only putting up 25 points in Oklahoma. A win is a win. Nico played good football, not great football. Oklahoma is a team I'm a little worried about. Oklahoma is a team that I think is actually pretty overrated. I don't like their offense. They struggle against some of these teams earlier on in the season. I need to see a lot more out of them. I really do. I'm worried about Oklahoma. They fall to Tennessee 25-15. Colorado pulls out a miracle victory against Baylor, a Hail Mary to send it to overtime in the rain before Travis Hunter forces a fumble at the goal line to win it in overtime. If Colorado had lost to Baylor there, we're having a much different conversation, but this Colorado team keeps getting bailed out by high-end talent. It's a fun way to play football. It's not a sustainable way to play football. It's a fun way to play football. I absolutely respect it. I love watching this team. It's not going to get them very far in conversations as far as playoffs go, but Coach Prime gets a huge W here in Baylor. This is exactly what this team needed. Get that momentum going after a big win against rival Colorado State. Keep it up. Maybe they can make some noise in the Big 12 this year, as it's kind of cannibalizing itself, like I said. And the last one that I wanted to focus on, all the way back to Friday night, Syracuse, a team that I thought was being a little underrated. Kyle McCord, coming from Ohio State, having a very resurgent season, loses to Stanford on a game-winning field goal from Stanford as time expired. They got too much pressure on Kyle McCord. He kind of reverted back to his Ohio State stuff. He looked really calm and comfortable when he was playing at Syracuse earlier in this season. They're not out of it yet. They're not out of it in the ACC outside of Miami. It's really a crapshoot right now. So they're not out of it yet, but it's a little bit concerning to see them fall to a Stanford team that's not expected to make too much noise. This is a Syracuse team that I thought was going to be ranked after this week. But let me know if there's any games that you wanted me to cover, any games that I missed out completely on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that college football. We'll talk about that later on this week as well. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are going to start our Monday night preview. We have 2 games to preview. The first one, Buffalo taking on Jacksonville. And of course, the second one, the Commanders traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. We'll talk about all of those games and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.